Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We are really glad you're here because today we are tackling something massive. Usually we might look at a tech trend or, a specific piece of psychological research, but today we are looking at the architecture of history itself.
We really are.
We're diving into a source titled The Iron Reign of Saddam Hussein.
And it is a massive topic. Just that title alone, The Iron Reign, it feels heavy.
It does.
It feels like we're about to walk into a very dark room.
Absolutely. The whole title of our source material is actually Saddam Hussein, The Rise, Rule, and Fall of Iraq's Most Feared Leader.
Right.
It's from a full history podcast series, which means we aren't just getting the highlight reel, we are getting the granular detail.
Yeah, the machinery.
We're looking at the machinery of how a person becomes that powerful, and more importantly, how that power eventually collapses.
What I love about this source, or what I find so effective, is that it structures the chaos of history into a very clear narrative arc.
Rise, rule, fall.
Rise, rule, fall. It sounds like a Shakespearean tragedy, doesn't it? But it's real life.
It really does.
And when the source uses terms like Iron Reign and Most Feared, it's giving us a specific lens. We aren't just looking at a president. We are looking at a specific type of authoritarian construction.
Right. And our mission today is to unpack that arc. We want to understand the rise. How does a kid from a mud hut in Tikrit end up with absolute power?
Yeah, where does that begin?
We want to decode the rule. What does an iron reign actually look like on a day-to-day basis? And then the fall. Is it inevitable?
It's the big question.
So let's get into it. The source starts logically with the rise.
The rise. And, often when we think of dictators, we think of them just being there.
Yeah, like they just appeared.
Like they appeared fully formed in a military uniform.
Yeah.
But the source really dwells on the fact that Saddam's rise was a slow, methodical grind. It wasn't an overnight coup where he just woke up in the palace.
Exactly. The source paints this picture of a young man who was essentially a street enforcer for the Ba'ath Party in the beginning, right?
It's fascinating and terrifying.
Yeah.
He started at the bottom of the revolutionary ladder. I mean, way at the bottom.
What does that even look like?
The source mentions his early involvement in the failed assassination attempt on General Qasim in 1959.
Okay.
He wasn't the mastermind. He was the gunman. He was the muscle.
Just a guy with a gun.
Just a guy with a gun. And he actually got shot in the leg and had to flee.
That's a key detail. The source highlights the mythology he built around that.
Oh, absolutely.
The idea that he dug the bullet out himself with a razor blade.
Right, which is almost certainly a fabrication, or at least a wild exaggeration.
But it's great for the resume.
It's perfect for the resume. And it's part of the rise. The source argues that the rise wasn't just about gaining titles. It was about building a myth of invincibility.
Right.
But the real work, the iron work, happened in the shadows during the late 60s and 70s.
So this is when the Ba'ath Party finally takes power in 1968. Saddam isn't the president.
Nope.
He's the number two. He's the deputy.
And that is the most dangerous position to be in, or to have someone in. The source details how, for over a decade, he was the guy behind the guy.
The power behind the throne.
Literally. Ahmed Hassan al-Bakr was the president, the older figurehead.
Yeah.
But Saddam, he controlled the security services. He controlled the intelligence networks.
This is what the source calls the bureaucracy of terror, isn't it?
That's the phrase, yeah.
He wasn't just giving speeches. He was memorizing the organizational charts. He knew who was where, who owed what to whom.
Precisely. The rise was defined by his capture of the party apparatus. It was a slow-motion coup.
How did he do it?
He placed his relatives from Tikrit in key positions. It became a family business.
So loyalty through blood.
Loyalty through blood and fear. And then he slowly nationalized the oil industry, which, well, that gave him the money to buy loyalty from everyone else.
The ultimate tool.
The ultimate tool. The source points out that by the time he actually became president in 1979, the rise was already effectively over.
It was a done deal.
He had already won. Taking the title was just a formality.
But the source highlights one specific event in 1979 that really marks the transition from rise to rule. The Cult Hall Conference.
Oh, that footage. If you've ever seen it or even just read the description in the source, it chills you to the bone.
It's pure theater, but it's real.
It's terrifyingly real.
Let's break that down for you because it's such a cinematic moment of horror. It's July 1979. Saddam has just officially taken the presidency.
He's been in power for, what, a few days?
He calls a meeting of the entire Ba'ath Party leadership in this auditorium, hundreds of people.
Everyone is sitting there smoking cigars. You see them in the video. They're looking a bit nervous, maybe excited. It's a new era.
And Saddam is on stage, very calm, almost tearful at one point. He announces that there has been a betrayal, a conspiracy.
And the ear just gets sucked out of the room.
And then he starts reading names.
He reads names off a list. And as each name is called, guards come in and drag that person out of their seat.
It's unbelievable.
And the source describes the psychology in that room. You have grown men, hardened revolutionaries, suddenly realizing that if they aren't dragged out, they have to prove their loyalty right now.
How do you do that?
So they start chanting louder and louder. Long live Saddam. We sacrifice our blood and souls for you, Saddam.
It's the moment the Iron Reign truly begins. It's not just a political takeover, it's a psychological one.
Total subjugation.
And the source notes that he forced the remaining ministers, the ones who weren't arrested, to go outside and form the firing squads.
He made them complicit.
Made them execute their own colleagues.
That is the ultimate consolidation of power. That is the end of the rise. You are no longer rising. You are the undisputed apex.
And everybody knows it.
By making everyone else guilty, by making them complicit in the violence, he ensured that their survival was tied entirely to his survival. That is the foundation of the Iron Reign.
So we move from the architecture of the rise to the reality of the rule. The source calls this the Iron Reign. And we talked a little bit in the intro about that word iron. It implies something unbending.
Unbending is the perfect word. The 1980s in Iraq, as described by the source, was a decade defined by total war and total surveillance.
Oh, right.
You have the most feared leader operating a state where fear was the primary currency. It wasn't about patriotism or ideology anymore. It was just fear.
Let's talk about the war first, the Iran-Iraq war. The source dedicates a huge chunk of the rule section to this.
It's impossible to separate the rule from that war. It started in 1980, just a year after he took total power.
So a year after that conference?
A year after the purge. The source argues that this was Saddam's attempt to become the leader of the Arab world, not just Iraq.
A grand ambition.
A huge ambition. He saw Iran in chaos after their revolution and thought, I can take them, it'll be a quick victory.
Which was a massive miscalculation.
A historic miscalculation. I mean, one of the biggest of the 20th century. It turned into an 8-year meat grinder. Trench warfare. Chemical weapons. It was like World War I in the desert.
1 million casualties.
1 million casualties. But here's where the iron part comes in. The source explains that a flexible leader, a pragmatic leader, might have sought a diplomatic exit when things went wrong.
Yeah, cut your losses.
But an iron leader, he doubled down.
He couldn't admit he was wrong.
Never. He framed it as the Saddam's Qadisiyah, referencing an ancient battle against the Persians. He made the war about his personal destiny.
And because he couldn't admit a mistake, because iron doesn't bend.
The whole country had to suffer for 8 years. The source details how the economy, which was, booming in the 70s with oil money, was completely gutted.
All that potential just gone.
Wasted. But his grip on power, it never wavered. In fact, it got tighter. The war was the perfect excuse to crack down on any dissent.
The source mentions the cult of personality during this rule phase. It wasn't just fear, it was this mandatory adoration.
Oh, it was inescapable. You couldn't walk down a street in Baghdad without seeing his face.
Statues, murals.
Statues, murals, wristwatches with his face on them. The source describes how the evening news was essentially just the Saddam show.
Right.
Him visiting farmers, him shooting rifles, him patting children on the head.
It's weird, isn't it? If you are the most feared leader, why do you need to be everywhere? Why do you need everyone to pretend they love you?
That's the paradox of the Iron Reign. The source argues that the cult of personality is actually a tool of the fear. It's not separate from it.
How does that work?
If you force people to say, I love you, when they actually hate you or fear you, you have broken their spirit. You have forced them to live a lie. And if they're living a lie, they're compromised. They're easier to control. It's a form of psychological torture on a national scale.
And the consequences for not participating in the lie were horrific. The source brings up the mukhabarat, the intelligence agencies.
The ears of the walls. The source details a society where trust had completely evaporated.
Completely.
You couldn't trust your neighbor. You couldn't trust your cousin. Sometimes you couldn't even trust your children.
That's horrifying.
There were stories of kids mentioning something their parents said at the dinner table, just innocently at school.
And the parents disappear.
The parents would disappear the next day.
That is the fear in Iraq's most feared leader. It's not just fearing a soldier with a gun, it's fearing the silence. It's fearing the knock on the door at 3 a.m.
Exactly. And the source highlights the brutality against specific groups to maintain this. We have to talk about Halabja.
Yes, the chemical attack in 1988. This is a very dark part of the source.
It is. Toward the end of the Iran-Iraq War, Saddam turned his military on the Kurdish population in the north.
Why?
He suspected them of siding with Iran. So he launched the Al-Anfal campaign, which was essentially a genocide.
And Halabja was the worst part of it.
The source describes the bombardment of the town of Halabja with a cocktail of mustard gas and nerve agents. 5,000 people died almost instantly.
Civilians, women, children.
Civilians.
Yeah.
Just going about their day. And the source emphasizes that this was a message. This wasn't just a military tactic.
It's a demonstration.
It was a demonstration of the Iron Rain. It was saying, there are no lines I will not cross. There is no moral boundary. It solidified his status as the most feared. No one could doubt it after that.
But the rule isn't static, it evolves. After the Iran-Iraq War ends in 1988, you'd think, okay, time to rebuild. Time to, relax the iron grip a little bit.
But the logic of the Iron Rain doesn't allow for relaxation. It only knows how to tighten.
Why not?
The economy was shattered. He owed billions of dollars to other Arab nations, including Kuwait, who had funded his war.
Right.
And this leads to the next pivotal moment in the rule, the invasion of Kuwait in 1990.
This feels like the moment where the iron starts to rust, or at least where the structural integrity gets compromised.
I think that's a perfect way to put it. The source frames the invasion of Kuwait as the beginning of the end, even though the end took another 13 years to arrive.
It was another miscalculation.
Another miscalculation born of arrogance, pure hubris. He thought the world wouldn't care if he took Kuwait. He thought he'd get away with it.
He was wrong.
He was very wrong.
The Gulf War follows. A massive coalition forces him out of Kuwait. The Iraqi army is decimated. Uprisings happen in the north and south.
And this is where the Iron Rain was tested the most. In 1991, after the Gulf War, his control was slipping. For a moment, it looked like it was over.
But it wasn't.
The source describes how he used the Republican Guard, his elite loyalist units, to brutally crush those uprisings.
Okay.
He survived, but the country was broken.
The 90s, according to the source, were the sanctions era.
It was a grim period.
Yeah.
Just grim. The world cut Iraq off. The source paints a picture of a country that was once modern and wealthy with a great education system.
Yeah, in the 70s, it was a rising power.
Absolutely. And in the 90s, it was sliding backward into poverty, malnutrition, lack of medicine.
It fought Saddam.
He's building palaces.
That contrast is staggering. The people are selling their furniture to buy food, and he is building dozens of marble palaces all over the country.
It reinforces the feared leader narrative. Yeah. It's a display of power. He was telling the world and his own people, you cannot starve me out. I am the state.
Wow.
The source suggests that during the 90s, his rule became even more paranoid, more insular.
The walls were closing in.
Yeah. He trusted fewer and fewer people, mostly just his sons, Uday and Kwase, and his immediate tribe. The circle of trust shrank to a dot.
Which sets the stage for the final act.
That's the final act.
The fall.
The fall.
It's 2003. The source moves into the invasion led by the U.S. And what strikes me and you is how quickly the rule evaporated.
It is shocking. The source notes that for all the iron, for all the statues, for all the fear, when the pressure was truly applied, the structure collapsed in weeks.
Why? I mean, that's the central question. If the Iron Rain was so strong, why did it fold so fast?
Because, as the source argues, fear is a brittle material. It's not strong like steel, it's strong like glass.
It shatters under pressure.
Exactly. Loyalty bought with money or coerced with terror isn't real loyalty. When the American tanks rolled into Baghdad, nobody fought to the death for Saddam.
No last stand at the palace.
The regular army just went home. They took off their uniforms and walked away. Why would they die for him?
The source describes that iconic moment, the statue in Firdos Square coming down.
It's the visual bookend to the rise.
It really is.
The rise was the 1979 purge, the consolidation of terror. The fall begins with that giant metal statue of him bending and breaking at the waist. It's symbolic. The iron wasn't real, it was hollow.
But the man himself didn't vanish immediately. He went on the run. The source calls this the ghost phase of the fall.
He went back to where he started, back to the Tikrit area, back to the farm country.
There's an irony there.
A huge irony. The source points it out. The man who built palaces with gold faucets was hiding in a literal hole in the ground.
The spider hole.
The spider hole. When they found him in December 2003, the source describes him as disheveled, confused, clutching a pistol he didn't use.
He didn't fight back.
No. And his first words were, I am Saddam Hussein, president of Iraq.
It's such a stark contrast to the most feared leader. The source really leans into this. The fall strips away the myth.
Completely.
Without the security apparatus, without the torture chambers, without the army, he was just an old man in a hole.
And then comes the trial. The source spends some time on this because it was Saddam's last attempt to rule, even from the defendant's chair.
He didn't act like a prisoner, did he?
Not at all. He argued with the judges. He questioned their legitimacy. He brought the Quran into the courtroom and would lecture people.
What was he trying to do?
He tried to frame himself as the defender of Iraq against foreign invaders. The source argues he was playing to history.
He knew it was over.
He knew he was going to die. He wanted to die as a martyr, not a criminal. He was trying to write the final chapter of his own myth.
But the fall concludes with the execution in 2006.
It does. And it was a messy, chaotic affair. Not what you'd expect.
How?
The source describes the cell phone video that leaked. It wasn't a solemn state execution. It was sectarian taunting from the guards. It was gritty. It was ugly. A reflection of the chaos he'd unleashed.
So we have the full arc: rise, rule, fall.
From the revolutionary gunman to the absolute dictator in the palace to the prisoner on the gallows, the complete story.
Now, let's try to synthesize this. Let's connect the dots. The source calls this the Iron Reign of Saddam Hussein. When we look at that whole timeline from the late 60s, 2006, what is the big takeaway?
What's the through line?
Yeah. How do we connect the rise to the fall?
The connection is the method. That's what the source keeps coming back to.
The method.
The methods he used to rise, the brutality, the paranoia, purging rivals, created the nature of his rule. He had to rule that way.
Why?
Because he had eliminated anyone who could offer a different path. Anyone who might have counseled moderation or diplomacy was gone, purged in 79 or long before.
He was surrounded by yes men.
Only yes men. And that iron rule, in turn, made the fall inevitable.
Because he created a system where no one could tell him the truth.
Exactly. The source implies that the Iron Reign created an information vacuum around him, a black hole.
That's a great way to put it.
His generals were too scared to tell him the Iraqi army couldn't win against the U.S. His advisors were too scared to tell him the economy was collapsing under sanctions.
Fear prevents truth.
When you rule by fear, you end up blind. The iron walls you build to keep enemies out also keep reality out.
So the most feared title, it's a double-edged sword.
A complete double-edged sword.
It keeps you in power, but it ensures that your power is brittle.
And it ensures that when you fall hard. There is no soft landing for the most feared leader. There is no retirement home, no writing memoirs in exile.
No golden parachute.
The source makes it clear. The violence you project outward eventually comes back inward. The end is almost always as violent as the rule.
It's a character study of the man, too. Saddam Hussein. The source keeps centering him, the individual.
It does. It asks us to look at the psychology of a man who could order the death of his own sons-in-law.
Which he did.
Which he did, by the way, another detail the source covers. He lured them back from Jordan with a promise of pardon and then had them killed.
Unbelievable.
A man who could gas his own citizens. The source suggests that for Saddam, the Iron Reign wasn't just a strategy. It was his identity. He couldn't conceive of himself as anything other than the absolute master of Iraq.
And in the end, that identity consumed him and the country.
It left a scar on the region that is still there. I mean, we're still living with the consequences. The source reminds us that the fall of Saddam didn't end the violence in Iraq. In some ways, it uncorked it.
Right. It created a power vacuum.
A massive one. But the Iron Reign, that specific structure of one-man totalitarian rule, was shattered.
It's a powerful narrative. Rise, rule, fall. It seems so neat when you say it like that, but as the source showed us, it was messy, bloody, and incredibly complex.
It's the anatomy of a tragedy played out on a national scale. Millions of lives caught up in the arc of one man's ambition.
So here is the question for you, the listener, as we wrap up. The source presents this Iron Reign as something that was doomed to fail because of its own rigidity.
Right.
But often, in the moment, these regimes look invincible. They look permanent.
That's the illusion of the iron. It looks so strong from the outside.
Exactly. So understanding this life cycle, how the rise sets the trap for the rule, and how the rule guarantees the fall, does that change how we look at power structures today?
It has to, doesn't it?
When we see a leader projecting that iron image, that strongman image, should we be impressed by their strength or should we be looking for the cracks?
That is the ultimate question.
Yeah.
Is rigidity strength? Or is it just the precursor to shattering? The source seems to suggest the latter, that true strength has to have some flexibility.
Something to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the dark history of the Iron Rain. We'll see you next time.
Keep looking for the patterns.
And keep diving.